What is going on today, Dolphins fans? It is Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network. Continuing our training camp preview today, we recently discussed some under-the-radar players that I think have an outside shot of making the team's 53-man roster. If you missed that video, go ahead, go back and check that one out. But today, we're gonna battle through this voice. I got a little bit of a sore throat going on, but yeah, thanks for bearing with me here because today we are highlighting some potential surprise cuts of the Miami Dolphins. Now, I'm not saying these guys will be cut, should be cut, more so just throwing out some realistic scenarios that we could see go down, which maybe can result into some surprise cuts later this offseason. Before I get into the list that I have for you today, I got to hear from you. So let's hear you drop your top, let's call them realistic surprise cut candidates. Go ahead, drop them in the comments. Get subscribed if you have not done so already. As always, thanks to everyone that already has. Also, real quick, huge thanks to Dean Grisham, who most recently sent me super thanks. Drop some thoughts on the Tua Tagovailoa contract extension as well. Hopefully, we're going to have some more news, some more good news on that situation very soon. But in the meantime, I'm happy to have those kind of conversations in the discussions in these videos leading up to that. So thank you. Thanks to everyone who is obviously commenting on the videos. But let's jump in. I believe I got 4 surprise cut candidates today. And we're going to start right now with a wide receiver that we took, I believe, in the 4th round of the 2022 NFL draft, and that is Eric Ezukanma. Now, here's the deal. We talked about this in one of the most recent videos. There's a surplus of Miami Dolphins wide receivers right now that I am considering to be NFL roster worthy. You just look at our roster and you're like, man, we're like 7, 8 deep, and that's not even counting like the Braylon Sanders of the world, who we were hoping was going to make this roster just a couple of years ago. So you're thinking to yourself, and if we don't end up trading someone, if we end up needing to cut somebody, who's that guy going to be? Well, here's why I'm putting Eric Ezukanma as a surprise cut. 1, he was a 4th round pick. It was just a couple of years ago. So that would be a surprise right now if he doesn't end up making this team's final roster. But the thing is, what has Eric Ezukanma done so far for the Miami Dolphins? Well, he's been a training camp and a preseason standout, and he's been basically a no-show in the regular season. So if you're looking at these other guys on the roster, I mean, you got your Braxton Berrios, you got your River Craycraft. Obviously, the top 3 with OBJ, Tyreek, Jaylen, Waddle, those guys are safe. But if you're looking at who can this team count on when the regular season does hit and we need to make, man, we got to make a 3rd down conversion. We got to get somebody. We got to get to move those chains. Who are you going to trust? Well, they've shown that they're going to trust Braxton Berrios and River Craycraft so far. The thing with Eric Ezukanma, it's not necessarily a talent thing, but what we learned is that Mike McDaniel wants his wide receivers to be able to play the boundaries, to be able to play in the slot, to be able to learn all of the routes. Well, so far from what we've seen from Eric Ezukanma, it's not been clicking there. And then add on to the last year with the neck injury that ended up coming back up, he just hasn't been available enough. So if you're looking at this wide receiver room and saying, who's one of those guys that just might not make it? Well, if they go off of who's going to be available in a time crunch when we need this guy, it's probably Berrios. It's probably Craycraft. It's going to be one of those guys, which would leave Eric Ezukanma out of the picture. So, yeah, like I said, I think that would be a surprise. I don't want him to cut. I think that he's got some good potential. It's just as he hasn't shown that he can be available up to this point so far. Let's get a drink of water, folks. I guess I'm just battling through this sore throat right now. Surprise candidate number 2. It's Channing Tindle, once again, another guy from that 2022 NFL draft. I'll talk about more about that here in a second. Now, what I would say that Channing Tindle has going against him, man, think about that. He's been here since 2022. He's going on defensive coordinator number 3. You'd say, well, maybe why is that a big deal? Well, that's a big deal because one of the reasons that we've been told why Channing Tindle can't get on the field in the first place, it's the mental side of things. It's understanding the playbook, understanding his role in the defensive scheme. Well, if he's going from Boyer to Fangio and now to Weaver, it's like, yeah, he doesn't have any familiarity with any of these coaches, with any of these schemes. And every time he's about maybe he's about ready to pick up on something, you get a new defensive coordinator in place. The other thing is, now that you do have a new defensive coordinator, probably those guys that were banging the table for him in that NFL draft, they're not in the building anymore. they're likely those defensive coaches, like at this point in time, they're not the ones that are in the building right now. So if talked about what he has kind of going against him. Well, what he's got going for him, if he is to make this team, it's the position in general. And I don't mind our linebackers right now, but if you're looking at them, maybe the depth isn't there. David Long, he's making it. Jordan Brooks, he's making it. But then you've got Anthony Walker, who we've heard some good reports from so far during minicamp OTAs. You got Duke Riley, who I also kind of think might be on the outside looking in. Then you got Cam Brown, who got brought in during free agency, maybe a guy that can add some stuff on special teams, some obvious rundowns. And then you got Quentin Bell. And now I know if you look at the roster, you're going to see other linebackers. I'm considering basically all the linebackers I didn't mention to be more of your edge rusher. So we're talking more so inside linebackers. So there's something that he's got going for him. It's just the fact that we're maybe not all that deep at the position in general. But like I said, he just doesn't necessarily have the coaching staff going back to bat for him. He doesn't necessarily have any of the on-field film experience going for him. What did we get to see him in so far? Some preseason action. And then he was called upon for what? A series, maybe 2 series to be a spy against Justin Fields and the Bears 2 years ago. And he didn't even get to fulfill that entire role for that entire games. And I think Justin Fields set a record for the most rushing yards in a single game by a quarterback in that game. So yeah, Channing Tindle is probably going to have his work cut out. And the thing, if you've been following the Fins Up Network for a while, you'll know that going into that draft, he was our first pick that draft. We didn't have a pick until the 3rd round. In those rounds, I had my eyes set on, if you wanted to go linebacker, I wanted Leo Chenal or I wanted Zach Tom if you wanted to go on the offensive line. Leo Chenal went the absolutely next pick after Channing Tindle. He just made a huge showing, a couple of big plays in the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you got Zach Tom, who went the next round, yet after Eric Ezukama. So we actually passed on Zach Tom twice. Well, now he's projecting to start at one of the tackle spots for the Green Bay Packers. So yeah, it hasn't really been all that clean for Channing Tindle so far coming into the league. And like I said, he just hasn't really been able to be trusted while he's been on the field. So yeah, he's going to go down as a surprise cut candidate for me as well. So this next one is a little bit interesting. And I think it depends on a couple of different things. And that's going to be quarterback Mike White, because based on what we're being told, what we're hearing so far, is that the Miami Dolphins aren't necessarily impressed with what they're seeing at the quarterback position behind Tua Tagovailoa. And look no farther than the OTA, the mini camp that was completed, about a month or so ago. Basically, when the Dolphins were on 7-on-7 drills, when Tua was being able to be the quarterback, offense was efficient. There was that one day where I think they had 1 incompletion, and that was on a drop. You move to the team drills where Tua was sitting out of because of kind of the contract dispute. When it was Mike White, when it was Skylar Thompson, the efficiency went away. The defense started to dominate. And even Mike McDaniel was saying, you know what? We really want Tua to be on the field right now during these training camp practices that are going to be upcoming later in July. Because if there's some, he's in year 3, and it's not like he's brand new to the system, but you're going to want to get your ones, your starters who are getting the reps in September, October, November, making a playoff push. You're going to have to get on the field with some of these guys at some point in time and show what you can do offensively, especially if this offense hopes to evolve. Getting the tight ends involved, getting a 3rd wide receiver involved, continuing to build upon the run game, play action, going under center, getting the plays into Tua faster. It takes time to develop all that stuff. We're going to have new offensive linemen this year. We're going to have a new center this year. We're really going to need Tua to be here. It's kind of a Tua rant, but we're going to need him to be here for training camp. But that leads me to say Mike White, Skylar Thompson haven't really been showing it so far this offseason when they've actually been on the field. So all signs are pointing towards the Miami Dolphins waiting for cuts to happen, see if there's any veteran quarterbacks that they think might be an upgrade to a guy like Mike White, signing him, or potentially trying to upgrade via trade, and maybe it's for a late round pick. But regardless, quarterback is tricky because it's not like there's anyone on the market right now that you're like, yep, let's get him. He's going to be better than Mike White. We're probably going to need to see these cuts happen. So yeah, it all probably depends on who else is cut. And maybe even a guy like Mike White makes the initial 53. You see who else is cut. And then maybe he gets released after that, which is risky business because you just had Mike White in training camp for the entire offseason, getting these reps. And now you're like, well, this other guy looks to be more talented, more suited for the position. And then you bring him in, and he's a guy that's never had a rep with the Miami Dolphins. So, yeah, I think Mike White would be a very big surprise cut candidate, but I'm not ruling it out. All right, let's go on to my final one. And that is running back Jeff Wilson. Now, Jeff Wilson became kind of onto this list, and maybe I think there's going to be a crowd of people out there that think Jeff Wilson is an obvious cut candidate. And that happened because when you re-sign a guy like Salvon Ahmed, when you end up trading up into the 4th round to draft a guy like Jaylen Wright, it's like, well, Jeff Wilson's been here. He's had a couple of moments, but he really hasn't panned out. Like he could probably be on the chopping block. Well, another thing that we've been told, what we've been seeing during OTA's minicamp, Jeff Wilson is playing like a man possessed. He understands where he kind of falls right now on that depth chart. He's going to make it a chore for these other guys to get the reps over him. So if he can do that, that's all fine. You push the other guys down the depth chart a little bit. Maybe they don't get the snaps, but at the end of the day, I think we're still going to see a lot of Jaylen Wright this year. Maybe not a lot. Maybe that's an aggressive word, but regardless, I think they're going to see what we have with him. I think they're going to utilize him in a lot of packages where we can really highlight what he can bring to the table. But the thing with Jeff Wilson, like I said, kind of like what he's got going against him is ever since we've brought him in, he's had the sporadic moments. He's had the occasional games or two. Another guy that's dealt with some injuries, another guy that's really been kind of struggling, I would say, to get on the field when both Mostert and Achane were healthy. When those guys are healthy, I still think a guy like Jaylen Wright can warrant snaps, whereas I'm not sure that a guy like Jeff Wilson can warrant snap. Look at the roster. You got Mostert, you got Achane, you got Wright, you got Chris Brooks and Salvon Ahmed. And then you still got to factor in, you got Alec Ingold, that fullback, who's definitely going to get a roster spot as well. So if you consider Mostert, Achane, Wright as your guarantees, you're probably keeping one more. You're probably going to keep one more of that list between Wilson, Ahmed, and Brooks. I think Ahmed maybe he provides a little bit too much of a duplication of effort, so I would say that he's probably on the outside looking in. So then if you go between Jeff Wilson and Chris Brooks, it's like, well, Chris Brooks is on an undrafted free agent contract, a guy that hasn't been able to do too much in the league. If you're looking for a potential cost savings move, whereas I should have looked up Jeff Wilson's cap coming into this, but I can guarantee he's getting paid more than a guy like Chris Brooks. So if you want to invest more time, energy, resources into a guy that's a little bit younger, you can turn to a guy like Chris Brooks, potentially give him the roster spot, potentially let him be the bigger power back in this backfield as well on game days when he's active. And then you can cut Jeff Wilson in the process, take probably a little bit of a hit, but at the end of the day, you're still saving some cost. I could see that happening. So like I said, there's probably a crowd of people out there saying, Jeff Wilson, he's not a surprise. He's definitely on the outside looking in, and I understand that. But at the same time, like I said, keep an eye on him because he has been playing like a man possessed. He understands what's on the line, and he's not going to let it go easily. Like I said, thank you for putting up with my voice in today's video. It's been a little bit of a battle. I wanted to record this yesterday. I haven't quite been able to. So thank you guys for putting up with that. As always, like I said, if you haven't gotten subscribed yet, make sure you are doing so. We're going to have a few more videos here leading up to Miami Dolphins training camp. And then once training camp does hit, we'll be giving recaps on all of the practice reports that we are able to do so. We will cut it right there for today, Miami Dolphins fans. But until next time, Fins